Hello, I'm Kiley Jacques. I'm the design editor with Fine Homebuilding magazine, and I'm joined today by Rob Watzak, the digital brand manager, and Laura Britt of Britt Design Group in Austin, Texas. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Laura's going to talk a little bit about how she referenced the WELL Building Standard, which is a global rating system focused on the ways that buildings can enhance human health and wellness, to design her own LEED Platinum house for her and her family. Last week, we talked about the Living Building Challenge, and during that conversation, the point was made that there's a trend toward, or that the trend toward designing buildings and homes to support human and environmental health is likely to gain more traction following the pandemic. So now's a good time, I think, to talk about what goes into a healthy home, and Laura's house makes a really informative case study. So I think it's important to note that the WELL standard currently is not something that can be applied to single family homes, although it is being piloted for multi-family home certification. So I'm curious to know why it is that you decided to use that standard to inform the design of your house. So maybe you can introduce yourself a bit and then get into that topic.
Sure, yeah. So kind of going back a little bit further than my design orientation right now, what I've realized is I've kind of been experiencing some of the health effects of not healthy building, and started to finally realize that as a young adult. I probably around graduate school age, when I came to Austin to study architecture and focus on sustainability, I started realizing the health effects of what was happening when I would have my own do-it-yourself projects, and the effects of some of those chemicals and toxins on my upper respiratory system. And I was kind of prone to that. When I was an infant, I was hospitalized with pneumonia when I was 3 months old, and I've had a lot of upper respiratory issues since then. So I feel like I'm maybe a little more sensitive than some people, and maybe kind of that canary in the coal mine that can warn others about health effects of some of these products that we use. And so with that in mind, I realized when we had the opportunity to build the house, and I can give you a little backstory on how that happened, but when we had the opportunity to build from scratch, I realized that we really wanted to build the healthiest home we could as a case study and an experiment. We called it our living laboratory. And I wanted to create a really healthy home environment for my family. So that's how we started. And LEED is kind of, LEED's been our standard, for sustainable building and touches on healthy building. But I feel like WELL takes it to a whole another level, where we can really think about occupant health and wellness from a human-centric standpoint. I certainly believe global sustainability is incredibly important, but I'm really interested on how do we build so that we're positively impacting the people who are living and working in our spaces we're designing.
Well, with that in mind, can you talk about why the WELL Building Standard spoke to you as a way to make the healthiest house possible?
Sure. Yeah, I think that, the WELL standard touches on a lot of the key elements that I think are important to health and happiness. And happiness is one of those things that's kind of hard to measure, I think, but there's an intrinsic value in being in well-designed spaces that people just feel. And it may sound a little bit touchy-feely, but I do think that the spaces that we inhabit impact how we feel. Part of our mantra in our national organization is design impacts lives, and I believe that. I really do. I think that the spaces that we're in can really impact how we're functioning, how we're working, how we're interacting with others. And WELL building touched on a lot of the things that I think are important. The air quality, indoor air quality is a huge topic of my personal interest. And so it touches on indoor air quality, and it touches on solutions for that. And working with really smart people in other fields, we were able to kind of explore some of those solutions. Touches on water quality and purification and filtration, light, connection to outdoors. There are a lot of elements here that I think were really instrumental in informing the way that we set the building on the site, so to speak, the way we sited the building, and also the way that we connected to the outdoors, so that we have this really beautiful connection between inside and out. And I think that really changes the way that we're using the space, especially during this time where we're inside so much.
Right. Now, am I right to think that you had applied the standard to your office? And was that your first experience working with that checklist?
Actually, the office was just completed at the end of last year.
Oh, okay.
So the office came after the home,
Okay.
and the office is, we follow the well building certification guidelines. So our intention is that we will go through the certification process when we're all back to the office and start working through that checklist, the certification process for the office to be well building certified.
So just out of curiosity, because I know more about LEED certification and those benchmarks, and you don't have to go too deep on this, but I'm curious to know what the difference is. You said that LEED touches on some of these wellness-focused, performance areas, but how does WELL take it to another level?
Yeah. So WELL is I would say WELL is more focused on the inside of the home and more focused on, like I said, air quality and those sorts of issues, performance of the home over the long run. So that is one thing that we're realizing with WELL, that we can design to a certain standard, but we have to continue to measure the performance of the home. And honestly, that's one of the biggest challenges I think that we faced, is how do you measure the performance of the house? You know, we know we're building tighter homes. We know that we're building, there's just less airflow. We used to live in an old bungalow, and our office was also in an old bungalow. There's a lot of infiltration of outside air. So you constantly had a flow, whether you wanted it or not, with leaky windows and ducts and things like that. But in our new homes, they're built pretty tightly, and we don't have that infiltration of fresh air unless we intentionally design it into our systems. So we did focus a lot on that as well. But I think, there's a lot of room for innovation, I think, in the home building industry. And so for those who have that entrepreneurial bug and a little bit of a science background, creating opportunities for homeowners to really understand what's going on in their home and to easily understand it and see it visually is something still I think we have a little ways to go.
Does, and this is a little specific, I want to get into your house as a case study, but I'm just curious to know if smart technology is part of the WELL approach to monitoring systems. Like, how important is that people have?
I think it's important, and we did incorporate, and we can talk about that more specifically later, but incorporating the ability to monitor the home from a smart home perspective, that's really what I'm alluding to. Yeah. And I feel like that's something that's still not readily available on the market. At least it wasn't when we built. And we finished the home in spring of 2016. So, it's been a few years since we researched the details, but in general, I think that's where we need to go. We need it to be as easy to monitor our home as it is to monitor our temperature of our air, and it's getting there. I mean, we used some devices that were available kind of on the retail front to monitor in different areas of the home. But again, I wanted a little more data. So anyway, that was something that I found that I think there's room for improvement there.
Well, I noticed that it took 2 years to design this house, so clearly a whole lot of time, thought, and energy went into it. So maybe you can start describing some of those principles and how they take shape in your house. Sure.
And I'll tell you, part of the reason that the process was longer was because we thought we would be able to salvage the old home.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting bit to this story. You need to share that part.
It's a little unusual, maybe. Yeah. So we thought we would be able to remodel, but as we got further into the design process, we realized that the foundation was really inadequately designed for the soil conditions. So the piers,
what was the house that was there?
It was a single-story ranch style home built in the 50s, and the piers were about 3 feet deep. And when we went back to do some analysis, we did geotech analysis, we realized that the piers should actually be about 20 to 22 feet deep.
Oh boy, okay.
So there was a lot of shifting and movement of the home. There was a lot of cracking on the stone facade. There was a fair amount of cracking in the interior. Everything except, the beautiful pink bathroom tile that you wish would crack and didn't crack.
Right. That always sticks around.
Always sticks around. I think we had one pink and one peach bathroom across the hall from each other. So other than those terrible tiles, everything else was cracking. So we ended up trying to find a solution so that, the house still had a fair amount of life in it, but it just really wasn't designed to sit on these soils. There's too much movement here. So we decided we would try to give the home away and let someone else utilize it, move the home off of the lot since most of it was pier and beam. And we tried a few different avenues, and it ended up being a little harder to give a home away than you would expect. So the funny part of that story is I decided in the middle of the night I'd had enough of this, and surely there was a solution. So I decided we'd post it on Craigslist, and this isn't something I have a lot of experience with, but I decided to post the house, free home, you move, on Craigslist, and didn't realize that we started getting all these texts in the middle of the night. It's midnight and the phone's just going crazy, and I didn't realize our phone number was showing up, and so people were texting us about this free home that we were offering that they could move. So finally we found the right person, the right family for this home, and we gave it to a family of I think 14. I believe they had 12 children, if I remember correctly. And they moved the home in 3 segments. So they segmented the home. You have to find a home builder who's willing to move in Austin, which is a very complicated process.
Wow.
And you segment the home. You literally cut it into thirds, and they moved the center section first. So it was so interesting to have the bookend of the left and the right side of this house standing with nothing in the middle. It was such
wild.
a great thing. And then we had a police escort each of the 3 nights, and then the trees have to be trimmed as you're going down the street and everything. So it was quite a process to keep this home out of the landfill.
If anybody's interested in that, Laura has a video on her website.
It's true.
Yeah,
that is true.
Interesting to see.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We did enjoy kind of seeing that process and understanding what it takes. And I can understand why there aren't very many home builders in this area. It's complicated. So that's how we started the whole process, and that took a little extra time because as I said, we started with a remodeling project. Then we did more analysis of the soils, understood more of the problems that were happening from a foundational standpoint, structural standpoint. And then, when we were able to donate the home, we then had a clean slate. I mean, literally a blank lot where we could design and build anything that we wanted to within the constraints of the city and the code and all that. So we lost a little bit of side lot land. We had a deeper setback when we built, but we really wanted to incorporate renewable power. And so, that coupled with probably first, the solar orientation was really important to us. Having lived in the home briefly before it was removed, we started to really understand the sun patterns and the heat gain that happened from this really intense southwest facing backside of the home.
In Texas.
So we understood.
Right.
It really helped. I mean, it actually was really helpful to live on the lot, in essence, before we built. So we understood we really wanted to protect the house from heat gain. We still wanted a big connection to the outdoors, visual connection and ease of access to outdoors. But we wanted to be able to use the space. And in Texas, it gets really hot. Mm-hmm. It's over 100 degrees for days on end. So in order to be outside, you need to be under shade. It's like wearing a big brimmed hat. It gives you the shade. Same thing with our homes. We need that big shading device at our roof to make it bearable outside when it's hot. So this is a time I'm really thankful. We incorporated a lot of porches. We have a huge back porch. We have a small front porch, which is our connection to the neighbors, which has been really nice as we're all working from home and seeing our neighbors walking by at a distance. Yeah. And they have a small front porch, where the mail gets delivered and we greet neighbors and that sort of thing. But that was part of our process, was understanding kind of how the sun works on this lot. What is the path of travel of the sun? How do we need to protect ourselves from the sun, but still keep the light? We wanted a lot of natural light. And that was kind of the beginning of the whole process.
Okay. So I noticed that, maybe you can talk a bit about how you designed the layout to be as functional and efficient as possible, and some of the other efficiencies that make it a highly functional house.
Sure. That was also pretty important to us. We wanted to have a pretty small footprint. And, you talk to a lot of different people in the industry, and they all have different opinions about how to build, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how to build homes that can be resold. And I know that matters, but it wasn't really my main concern. I wanted to build a home we could be in for a long time and that would fit our family's needs over time. And my son was early elementary school at the time, and his needs are different now as a young teenager than they were then. And so we wanted to have a home that could kind of grow and evolve with us. And I didn't want a lot of extra space that we weren't going to inhabit. So I really enjoyed reading the Not So Big House series by Sarah Susanka, and enjoyed spending some time with her and on retreat with her. And I just really embraced that concept for us. Now I'll say for many of our clients, they have much larger homes than we live in, and they have they're kind of gathering spots, and they're a place that they want their family to come back to, and things of that nature. And so that's a different need than what we have on a day-to-day basis. But we were fortunate when we bought the lot. There was a garage, a detached separate garage with an apartment, and so that could stay, and it was in great shape. It's fairly new, and that serves the purpose for our guests. If we have overnight guests, so that handled that need. And so other than that, we really wanted to build the house in a way that really fit what we needed. And we didn't need a lot of extraneous space. And so we have an open plan concept. We wanted a space that really functioned as a great room. So there was a lot of connectivity between the living, dining, and kitchen space, but with some privacy to the front, because we live on a fairly busy thoroughfare street, east-west here in Austin. And so that was kind of the first core. That's the core of the home. And then beyond that, we have two wings. So it's kind of a U-shaped home. And I think the diagrams are also still up on our website, so people can really diagrammatically understand the layout of the home and the functionality of it. So on one wing, we have kind of our master bedroom, closet, bathroom, and office, which is where I am right now in our home office. And on the other wing, we have a den and our son's room and the utility room that is adjacent to the carport. And so one of the things that was also important to me is that we separate the most toxic polluters, which would be our cars, from the home. And so we have an open air carport, which is shielded by a beautiful trumpet vine that we love. But it gives us a nice shield, but it also functions as kind of a pavilion. So when we have large family gatherings, kids run through there. They're on scooters. There's a ramp. We also created this as an accessible home. So there were kind of a few main goals. One of them being that it was a home that was designed for accessibility for aging in place. Mm-hmm. The other is that it was to be as healthy of a home as we could possibly create. And so, yeah. And so that's the layout is that kind of wing, the U-shaped configuration. And that center core in the back where we have the great room connection, beyond that is the porch. And so that's the big porch for us that we've been having dinner out there every night since we've been working from home. So it's an extension of our living space, and it also creates a huge shaded glass area, so we feel really connected to the outdoors, which has been wonderful.
I find the infographics that you shared, and we will share too, along with some images, very compelling. There's just so much that went into the choosing of materials. I wonder if you can talk about some of the key selections you made with wellness in mind.
Sure. Now, the infographic I thought was really helpful as well. We collaborated with Tornberg Design, Tom Tornberg, and he created that infographic for us, which was really, really quite helpful. And then we plugged in all of the information. So it was a really collaborative process. So I think one thing I failed to mention when we were talking about usability of space, if you don't mind me going back to that for 1 second.
Go right ahead.
When we did lay out the space, we created the den, and I should mention that the den is really intended to be dual function. And so we also used sliding pocketing doors throughout the home to save space. And so it's always a fun game to have people tour the home and then guess how big is the house. And the house lives a lot bigger than it really is, but it's 2,750 square feet. but we have an additional 1,000 feet of porches on the outside. So it really feels a lot bigger than it is on the inside. And the den is one of those rooms that, if you think about the bar of the great room with living, kitchen, and den, the den is connected, but it's also able to be closed with very large pocketing doors. And so that has been really one of those things I didn't know how it would work, because when it's open, it feels like an extension of the space. But when it's closed, you can have another activity happening in the den, and it doesn't distract anyone. But it has been really functional. And when we have grandmother come and stay with us, that's where she chooses to stay versus the apartment, So we didn't actually build a separate guest structure because we wanted to have just functional spaces that we really, truly inhabit all the time. And then we also thought about functionality of how could we change the space over time if we needed to. And so this office was designed so that the visual connection to the great room was blocked. I mean, it's a little bit private, and then there's a small powder bath with a shower, so that if it ever needed to be a bedroom, it could.
Mm-hmm. Lots of flexibility built in.
Yeah, the flexibility, we're really trying to think about that long term.
It seems like that is a very smart approach to aging in place. I mean, you really have to think, there are all those sort of standard things on the checklist of what to incorporate if you want to be in your home, that over time like that.
Right.
But it seems like flex space is something that doesn't get as much play. So it seems like it's really working for you, and you can imagine it working in different capacities down the line.
Right. And different ways that you could actually access the bedroom and the den if ever we wanted to remove the little home office space that we set up in the kitchen. Again, I'm really thankful that we did that, because we created a little pocket of space where my son can work. And he's been on the computer, for better or worse, with school all day, every day. And so he's within, he's kind of visually and connected to us, which is nice. So we can keep an eye on what's going on, and if he has a question or anything. But it's separate enough that he has his own little work area, which has been really helpful during this time.
Okay, so let's talk about the structure in terms of how it was built, some of the key materials.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So when we built the home, we debated about slab on grade versus pier and beam. And one of the things that was important to me when we built the house is that we had a little bit of give. So there was a little bit of bounce in the flooring system. Not tremendous, but enough that you have a little bit of relief on your joints. And so we decided to build on piers so that we would be able to create that little deflection, if you would, like subtle deflection in the wood floor. And that kind of sent us on a whole trajectory of other decisions. The house is primarily intended to be low maintenance. That was kind of the third key component. There was accessibility, there was aging in place, kind of accessibility, healthy home, and then also very low maintenance. Those are our key features that we wanted to incorporate. And so the house is pier and beam with a stucco exterior and a painted hardy board and a metal roof. That's kind of the key materials that you see on the exterior. Mm-hmm. And then for the flooring, for the outside decking, we were experimenting with a material that has a high content of bamboo in the decking material. So it's kind of like the decking planks that we've seen made out of recycled plastic. So it's kind of a hybrid of those materials, and it has a kind of a hidden fastener mechanism that holds it in place. So that was the first time we had worked with that material, and I think we've learned a few things about the material and how it works and how it actually can move and contract just a little bit, things like that we wouldn't have known otherwise. The outside, the landscaping, I should mention, the way that we sided the building, we allowed for gardens around the entire home. I actually just picked several bouquets because there's so much blooming right now. We brought a little bit of that inside.
I'm glad you mentioned your landscape, because that's always of interest to me. And I noticed that it's actually a certified urban wildlife habitat by the National Wildlife Federation. That's so fascinating. We can't get too deep into that, but how did that come about?
Well, we had a wonderful landscape group that we worked with on that, and they helped us envision that in a way I couldn't have at all. But they created different pockets. We have a fountain when we enter the home. That was something that was important to me, to kind of leave that exterior behind, leave the noise and the sound of it. As you ascend the steps, you have this beautiful fountain, so you have the sound of the water flowing there. And it's a little bit of a transition space as you move inside. So we have rainwater collection tanks in the back of the house, 2 huge tanks that are now thankfully shielded with vegetation. And then bird feeders everywhere, various native landscape material that we use.
Was that a certification that or a recognition that you wanted to pursue, or did it just kind of unfold? Was that something you?
Honestly, it kind of unfolded. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's almost like when we pursued LEED. Frankly, I wasn't really of that mindset when we started the home to pursue a certification. But once we got into the process, I realized that everything we were doing would actually support, we're already doing everything that is mandated or required for the certification. So I thought, well, we may as well actually have the certification. But it was actually quite a bit harder than it could have been, because we were already in the process of construction. And so it's a bit easier to start that process of certification prior to starting construction when we're in the design phase. So, but anyway, we had, again, great consultants we worked with on all of
that. Just in terms of, our audience is primarily builders. They're always interested in assemblies. Is there anything of special note regarding you talked about the floor, but the wall or roof assemblies that might be of interest?
We went through a lot of research and discussion, much discussion about insulation and blown-in insulation and closed cell insulation and open, all of these various things. So there's a lot of discussion about that, and I don't know that there's a perfect solution for any of it, but we did use a blown insulation under the floor of the home, as well as in the walls. And overall, I think we've been fairly successful with that. The interior materials, we were very, very careful. Anything from the sheetrock in particular, very careful about the off-gassing and toxicity. We're trying to really lessen the toxic load for all of us living in the home. And so the glues, the adhesives, the stains, the sealers, all of those things we're very careful about. So everything was low or no VOC, water-based. Anytime that was available, it was always water-based. And then I'm trying to think how to explain this, but like the cabinet carcasses are all formaldehyde-free. Mm-hmm. And so, you have to be fairly intentional about that, because it's still not the go-to solution. It's something you have to request, right? And there's a bit of an upcharge for it and that sort of thing. So that was something that was very, very important to me in terms of off-gassing and indoor air quality, because it is a tight home.
It strikes me that when it comes to homes that are really emphasizing, non-toxic products, that it requires pretty significant research to find sources to get those products. Or did you run into any issues there, or were you able to find the right materials, or did you have to make any sacrifices? Or
yeah, it was a challenge. I mean, maybe now it would be a bit easier, but at that time I felt like it just took a tremendous amount of research to understand kind of what's in the material. I mean, I felt like I needed to be a chemist, a biologist, a designer, an architect, just a builder. Like, I needed to be kind of all of those things to have success with the project. And, in some ways we have a lot of success. In other ways, there are things I probably would have done differently. But we were lucky at the time. We had a local, I called it an eco Home Depot, called Treehouse. Uh-huh. And it was a wonderful resource here in Austin. And they provided, a lot of guidance and some of the materials that we used. I think the exterior decking was something they provided. They were just starting to offer the paint that we used for the home, which is a mineral-based paint, which is absolutely beautiful. But, I would say they were a great resource for us, but unfortunately they're not here anymore. So that was kind of too sad, I thought. But I will say, you know, the other materials that we used, I had the great fortune of going to see these materials in person. So we had used a material called silestone in many of our clients' projects, and Costantino is the fabricator of that material. And so I went to Spain and saw the production of silestone, and I saw their other product called Decton. And Decton is what I was really interested in, because when I first saw the product and started to understand it, I realized there really weren't any binding agents in it. It was just the natural quartz and various other materials that were pressurized together. It's like 25,000 tons of pressure to bind these together, and they kind of bake it in these large sheets. And so I was really curious about that. So I had the opportunity to go tour the facility where they made it. And I was so pleasantly surprised that I didn't smell any off-gassing. I didn't have any trouble with breathing or anything like that, which can happen, you know, in manufacturing facilities. And so that was a product. They were very generous with us, and we were able to experiment with that product and use it throughout the home for countertops, inside and out. It's UV rated, so it can actually be used as exterior cladding. So in talking about assemblies, this is a really interesting assembly if some of the listeners are interested in that. It's a little more complicated than we're used to building here in terms of, you know, just applying a hardy to a wood stud wall. But it was kind of a clip system. But it's a very durable material. And I think in Europe it's been used for a lot longer than it has here. But that was another material which we really have been pleased with the durability of that material. Okay. And the functionality of it. There are things you learn about these materials that are new as you work with them, you know, whether they're more brittle, whether, you know, some materials stain more easily than you would expect from the outside materials. You know, there's a little more staining and maintenance that you've got to think about. So it's been a really good experiment for us to have this living laboratory where we learn these things on our home before we specify it for a commercial or residential project.
Definitely. Were there some other examples of things that you hadn't anticipated that you will bring with you to other projects in the future?
You know, there are a few things. We also are starting to understand more about off-gassing from media cabinets and things of that nature, kind of the formaldehyde and the heating up of the electronics and kind of the vapors that can actually happen there. And that was one thing I feel like we could have done a better job of ventilating the small audio-visual cabinet we have. We typically try to separate those cabinets from our sleeping areas in our clients' homes so that they're separated. I'm no expert on EMFs or anything like that, but I'm starting to understand a little bit more and hoping to get more educated about kind of what's happening in that arena too. But in terms of off-gassing, that's something I think that we could all do is remember to put our ventilation on timers. Remember to ventilate our AV cabinets. Remember to use our ventilation in the kitchen when we're cooking. You know, those are simple things we can do to keep the humidity levels low. We use a dehumidification system in concert with our VRF. So the diffuse system is set to a relative, humidity level and pumps in the fresh air and helps us maintain that humidity level that's appropriate for this part of the country. But I do think that we've got to kind of monitor that and watch that. And it's interesting because as much as we know about this industry, there are such small things that you have to understand, like how to actually set the monitoring device properly. Because if it's not set properly, you've actually negated all of that pre-design work, installation work, all of the things you've tried to do because of one simple setting. And we had that a couple of times with the VRF and the DHU, that we just had to learn how to operate it. So that was something that was kind of eye-opening to me, and it made me realize our clients, that we're building homes for, they need a lesson on all of these things.
Yeah, the operation of the house is really. I've heard a few designers say that kind of thing, whereby you can design the greenest house imaginable, but if the homeowner doesn't know how to operate it, then it's not functioning to its full capacity. That's
so true. That's so true. And our homes are becoming more and more complex, as you mentioned earlier, the smart home component of it. I mean, miles of cabling on some of our larger homes. I'm just like, astonished at the cabling and how long the electricians and the AV consultants are there. Yeah. And if we don't really teach the homeowners how to utilize all of the functionality of it, we've lost a lot of the effort that went into designing the home. Yeah. So that was something we also learned.
In terms of other mechanical systems, anything of note, heating and cooling, and what were your choices there?
Well, the VRF system was something that our MEP consultants, helped specify and help us understand a little bit more. That's new to me, until we built the house. And so that is a little bit different. It's more of it's a variable speed, but it can be on a constant flow, just at a lower speed. So most of our air conditioners, it's either on or it's off. It's like your gas pedal in your car. You're either pressing it to the floor, or you're all the way off of it, hitting the brake. This one, there's a variable speed. And so I think, the efficiency of that is important, and they helped us understand that. The electrical system, we have solar panels on the south-facing portion of our porch, the large back porch we have. And so that's generating a lot of our electrical load. It's supporting a lot of our electrical load. So that's been really great. Let me think about other systems that we incorporated.
You're a proponent of the tankless hot water heater, correct?
We are. We had a strange thing happen. We didn't have, let me think through this, but I think we didn't have any gas lines needed for the home, except for that tankless water heater. And for some reason, it was a code requirement here. I can't recall all the specifics, but so we had to run a gas line just, I think, for that, which was hard to understand because it was a solar paneled, like, electric, home. So, but for some reason, it was a code requirement. So you have to watch for things like that that are a little unexpected. We didn't think we needed to run any lines like that. But the other thing we did that I'm really thankful for, which seems a little counterintuitive in Texas, but we did lay the heated mat flooring under our master bathroom tile. And I have to say, if you're in a cold climate, this is unbelievable. It also provides enough heat in that space because it's radiant, right? So you're not forcing air as much, but it's a radiant heat. So it's a very comfortable heat. And it radiates, from the floor, and obviously heat rises. So it's a very comfortable space. And it can allow you to keep the setting a little bit lower in the colder months of the year, and still be really comfortable when you're in and out of the shower and things like that. So I think that was a really, really good experiment as well to understand how that worked. And it's been functioning really well. It has its own little thermometer where you can adjust the temperature up and down.
Speaking of functioning, I imagine you're doing a lot of monitoring. What kinds of numbers are you coming up with in terms of your, the tightness of your envelope and maybe your solar production? You said you contribute, or do you contribute back to the grid? Is that what you had said?
At times we do in the summer. Other months we're not quite meeting our demand. So it depends on how much sun we're getting. The monitoring is something, as I mentioned earlier, that honestly is something I wish we could do a little bit more with. We originally had these little devices that we would place in the different bedrooms. I think we had them in each bedroom and off of the den, if I remember correctly. And we could get VOC readings, and that was really interesting. And so you could definitely see a spike when you cooked, like when you're cooking dinner, spikes. And so it helped you see, like, you really need to ventilate. But the really interesting thing was, as soon as you open the door or window, it would drop immediately, completely drop back down to normal. The thing that was difficult, though, is that we didn't get enough specific data with those devices. And so this is something that I'm actually on the hunt right now for, kind of what is the next monitoring system that we can utilize, because I don't think those are available anymore on the retail market. So I've been talking to the MEP about other monitoring devices, and I think this is where I think there's truly an opportunity for someone who wants to take this challenge on, to make it easy, to make it integrated into, to make the monitoring, to be specific, to make the monitoring process easy to read and integrated into the smart home system. Yeah. It would be such a wonderful thing to have. I remember when we were in France, kind of at a very basic level, visiting some friends that moved from Austin over to France. And there was this simple little device that showed it was the cost of energy at different times during the day. And it was, like red, green, and yellow, or red, yellow, and green, I guess. And it would show you, oh, hey, it's really expensive to run your washing machine right now because it's at the peak time that everyone's wanting their air conditioning on or whatever it is. And so it was a cue that to make you think about how you're utilizing your resources, right? And how they're functioning for you and when you should be doing certain things. And so it was a device that really encouraged behavioral change. And I think that if we could get to a monitoring system that would help us understand what's really happening, because most of the time we're just using the space, but we have no idea what's really happening. We don't understand why there's a peak of VOCs in the middle of the night. Well, it's our respiration, so what can we do to mitigate that problem? And so if we had a monitoring system, which made it really easy to understand all of those things, really easy to see, and really easy to fix, that would give you a little solution to it, I think that would make a huge difference in occupant health and understanding of how we use our buildings and our homes.
Right, and it needs to be very user-friendly and intuitive. That's
almost like our tablets are now, our phones, our smartphones.
Right. Yeah. Just in terms of sourcing materials, what do you recommend for people as a place to go to if they are interested, builders, designers who are looking for alternative, verified products? What would you recommend as a source?
That's a great question.
I think of the Red List and the International Living Future Institutes.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have other suggestions?
Well, I think the Red List is a great place to start. We actually printed those out and put them up around our office just to remind all of our designers, what not to use. Mm-hmm. So that's a place to start. What not to use is a shorter list. This is a really, really complicated question.
Yeah.
And the complexity is magnified because you use one material, it's fine. You combine it with another and you may have a different result. And that's where it's just a little bit mind-blowing, I think, at times. So I think starting with the Red List is a really, really good idea. I also think if you're fortunate enough to have a team like we did, where you have different experts who can bring in their knowledge and their expertise, mm-hmm. Where you have an architect who really understands what's going in the home. And the challenge is a lot of our architects are not being trained in this mindset yet. We're starting to see that. I'm involved with the University of Texas on the advisory board, and we're starting to see that and encourage that kind of training and thought process. But it certainly wasn't around when I was in graduate school for architecture.
Yeah.
Declare is also another good resource, I think, so you can see that it's encouraging transparency and what's in the materials, what are the potential hazards, and just, I think creating transparency is really the goal.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we have a completely one-stop shop yet.
Sure.
I think there are a lot of different people who are trying to provide good resources. And there are others. I have a whole list I could actually post if that would be helpful.
Might be of interest. Does the well building standard, I know it's not for a residential application yet, but do they have that kind of a resource? Do they offer that? Product suggestions?
In a sense, but it's not necessarily an endorsement mechanism. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's more of a thinking approach.
Okay. I understand.
Yeah.
Anything else, Laura, that you would like to share with our listeners that you sort of felt like was maybe a takeaway or two from your project with your own design?
Yeah. Maybe just encouraging people who are building or thinking about building to really think about what you need as the homeowner and as the occupant from how you need to live in the home now to what it could be later, and really think about that from a long-term perspective. I think a lot of people, especially younger clients that we work with, they can't imagine like breaking their legs skiing or anything like that. And so we really try to encourage people to think about, okay, we're in best case scenario right now. That's fantastic. But let's think about other positions we could be in where we may need assistance temporarily, in the restroom or whatever the case may be, or a little bit wider doorways. Those are so easy to incorporate when you're designing the home. A few inches here or there is typically not going to break the budget or break the the footprint of the home. And it's something that you can do early. So that's something I try to encourage everyone to think about, is planning for the long term. When we were designing our home, my stepfather actually got very, very sick and was in a hospital bed for a while in their home. And so thankfully they had the capability to fit that bed in and out and through doorways and things like that. But had we not thought about that, it would have made it a lot harder for them during that time period. And thankfully he got better and everything's fine. But if you think about that early, it's pretty easy to make those modifications. For us, it was easy to even incorporate a ramp that's not, it's not an eyesore or anything like that, but every mover wanted to use it. When we brought the piano in, that's what they used. They don't want to go up the steps, with a big piano or cabinetry or things like that. There are a lot of things you can do to make it a lot easier. And I think thinking about the house as a support mechanism for making your life enjoyable and easy is something I would encourage.
That's the perfect closing thought. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your insights, and I look forward to sharing your house with our listeners. Okay.
Thanks,
It was a pleasure to meet you.
You too. Thanks,
Take
Rob.
care.